Om. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Dhamma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trilokyam Sacharacharam, Tatpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita, Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha, Tvameva Vedya Dravinam, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Yatha sarvani bhutani pratibhanti stitani cha yatraipo pashamam yanti tasmai satyatmane namaha. So, to review where we were before we went on our break. Is it getting too cold for you people? Yes, no?
No.
Okay. Do you need some water, Priya?
I'm okay, thanks.
So we are in the story of Leela. And can someone tell us what page number we're on?
Page
34. Oh,
Number
go for
20.
it. My apologies.
Page 34, which verse?
20.
20.
Verse 20. Okay, so where are we in our story? So Leela is a princess married to the king Padma. They got married as youngsters, and he is very comely. She really likes his comeliness. So she is quite obsessed with his beauty and having him around, and she thinks, if I die first, that'll be okay. But if he dies first, I'm going to be distraught. I'll just be wrecked. So this is a literary device. She does tapas, she does austerities, propitiates the goddess Saraswati. The goddess, being pleased with her tapas, says, I will give you boons. And she says, first boon, if my husband dies before I do, let his soul not leave the body. Boon number 2, when I ring you up on FaceTime, you come to see me. Meaning she propitiates the goddess to come visit her. And many years pass, many autumns, as it says in the text. And sure enough, when they're both old, Padma dies. So Leela follows the instructions, and instead of taking him to the smashan and cremating the body, she has him laid out on a bed of flowers. And then she rings Saraswati and says, I want to talk to you. Saraswati comes and she says, where's my husband? Where has he gone? So this age-old question, when a person dies, what happens? So Saraswati, having infinite power, takes Leela to a loka someplace, some locale. I'm a little chilly. Would you flip the switch up there for me? And into this hall. And all of a sudden, there in the assembly in this hall is King Padma. And he looks 16 years old. And then Leela says, what's going on? So we are now starting the teaching on the nature of existence. Did I skip any parts? I think that's where we are. So Puneet, will you chant for us this evening?
Sure.
Nice and loud so the Zoomies can hear.
Which verse are we on?
Verse 20, was that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And doesn't that start a new section?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Section 2.
The early history. Devya Uvacha, the goddess said, Asti kaschit chidakashe kvachit sansara mandapaha tatra Vasishtha namasi kaschit dharma parodvijaha. Somewhere in the sky of consciousness, there is a certain hall of worldly existence. There, a certain virtuous Brahmana named Vasishtha lived.
So she's telling a story. Once upon a time, somewhere in the great hall of worldly existence, where does exist? Chid Akash, Chit, pure consciousness, Akasha, space or sky. So this term, Chidakasha, is one of the favorite names for ultimate reality used here in Yoga Vasishtha. So here it means in the space of consciousness itself. There exists the whole of worldly existence. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, in one small, tiny portion of my infinite being is the whole cosmos. So the same idea, meaning this jagat, this world of name and form, is in consciousness. This is the basic fundamental teaching of Yoga Vasishtha. Now, how do we come to understand it? It becomes easy if you go to the dream state. Remember, you are the god of your dream, your mini Ishvara in the dream state. So in the space of your individual mind, in the hall of your imagination, you create the dream with people, objects, feelings, and thoughts. Everything is there. You are not in the dream is in you, but it feels like I'm in the dream. On awakening, I see, oh no, it wasn't real. It was just sankalpa, imagination. All right, next verse.
Tulyashila vayo vesha tasya bharya virudhati kadachit sadadar shadaha parivara yutam ripam. His wife was Arundhati, who was indeed equal to him in character, age, and appearance.
So
Once he saw below the king with his retinue.
So we have in this worldly hall of worldly existence, this sage, Vasishtha, and his wife, Arundhati. So they're sitting in the house, they're up on the second floor. Well, this Vasishtha, we don't know if it's the Vasishtha that we have in Yoga Vasishtha, but I bet it is. He wasn't making enough money from his teaching work. His Sanskrit students weren't paying him much. You know, he was a poor Brahmin. And he's bemoaning the state of that. Looks out the window and there's a king passing by with his retinue. So now we're going to be introduced to the idea, what causes incarnation? What causes me to take up a body and live a life? It is kama, desire. I'll be happy when, it'll be better if. Now, you do not need to believe in reincarnation to get value from this. I'm thinking of a particular friend who had an apartment in Chicago. She worked in Chicago. She was a yoga teacher, had a successful student body. And for a variety of reasons, she thought it would be better if she moved to California. She moves to California, COVID happens, she's stuck up in Sebastopol. Everything was okay, but it certainly didn't give her the firecracker, beautiful existence that perhaps she thought it might. So then her mind said, I never should have left Chicago. I should go back there. It's better. She packs up everything and moves back to Chicago. And she finds out what we always find out. It's just different. It's just different. And that means a car, a relationship, a job, anything. Maybe the initial rush of, oh, this is new. But very quickly, well, it's okay. I kind of like it, but it didn't give me the deep satisfaction that my heart longs for. And eventually we come to terms with the fact that the hole in my heart is a God-shaped hole. The Christian Saint Augustine has a wonderful quote. Thou hast made us for thyself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it finds its rest in thee. And it can take us a long time in this life to figure that out. Hindu scriptures would say it can take us many lives to figure that out. So there's Vasishtha looking out the window at the king passing in his retinue. Let's see what happens. Going on.
Aho Bhupalataramya Sarva Saubhagyalalita Kadasyam Aham Yevam Iti Sankalpavan Abhut. Kingship is indeed delightful, fondled by all good fortune. When shall I also be like this? Thus did he become possessed of fancy.
So he figures in his mind that it would be better if I were a king. And the language here has erotic connotations. One of the other things you find in Yoga Vasishtha, we are fondled by worldly pleasure. All sorts. So here for Vasishtha, it's not just women, it's wealth, it's power, everybody does what you say, nice clothes. But we have the same kinds of thoughts 1,000 years later. It would be better if I worked for Google. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world. What did they say today? $600 billion he's worth. Isn't that what they said on the news? He's richer than some nations. Oh, what I could do with that kind of money. Once we start to go down that road, the mind then creates sankalpa. Sankalpa, an incredibly important word in the tradition. And very difficult to translate. Wish, will, intention, thought, fancy. These are all different definitions of sankalpa. Anybody have another translation that they like of sankalpa?
Can someone spell it in the chat so I can take a picture of it?
Sankalpa. Sankalpa describes the process whereby thoughts become things. Or to be more technical, it describes how thoughts grossify, vibrationally become denser and manifest. So, some of you who've been in classes before will know this. Here is the law of sankalpa. Any sankalpa, thought, wish, will, desire, intention, fancy, consistently maintained, that isn't contradicted or conflicted, tends towards manifestation. It tends towards grossification. What keeps it from coming into being? If it's contradicted, if it's not consistently maintained, if it's conflicted, meaning I have another sankalpa that's in opposition to it. I have a sankalpa that I really want to accomplish this particular project. And then I can't do that. I'm not good enough for that. Conflicted, contradicted. Or it's not consistent. I want to start this business. I have this project. I'm getting all this done. And then, well, this is too hard. It doesn't seem to be working out. Maybe I should do this. We give up. Now, the scriptures say that the entire universe comes into being as the sankalpa of the infinite. The world is not created the way a potter creates a pot. It is imagined. And one of the things we're going to find in this scripture is that we as human beings, to a much greater degree than we know, participate in, reenact that creative process of the infinite. I'm going to set that thought aside. The law of sankalpa. Any sankalpa consistently maintained, that's not contradicted or conflicted, tends towards grossification. It goes from the realm of the subtle, meaning thought, into what we perceive as the physical. There's that old saying, thoughts have wings and thoughts are things and they have wings. So, what has Vasishtha done? Not being mindful of the consequences. He has set in motion through his desire. Gee, it would be better if I were a king. Let's see what happens. Going on. Before we do, I'm sorry. Any questions about this principle?
You're talking more. Oh, go for it.
One at a time, please.
What would be a contradiction coming from God? Like, would that be like circumstances that were already there, like preventing it from happening?
Well, you could climb up on top of the roof of my building and you could really meditate on the thought, gravity does not touch me. I can jump off and I will float through the air. Now, there are some yogis who may be able to levitate. But chances are the Lord's sankalpa is a hell of a lot stronger than yours. So you're going to fall on your face. I had a fellow come here who was studying some Kriya yoga traditions. I think they were Kriyas. They were talking about some of the yogis in the Himalayas who with their practices are able to live 400 years. I do not doubt this. But then I said, what happens at year 401? You're dead. Because the Lord's sankalpa is nobody gets out alive. Everybody dies. Does that make sense?
Right.
Okay, and Justin, did you have a question?
What you mean by this is more kind of like your relative imagination and your relative mind, like the or the relative experience of the mind is what you're talking about when you're talking about because it says personified when I look it up on that website you were talking about.
I didn't talk about a website.
A long time ago you gave me a reference for and it's like for a dictionary for Sanskrit.
What does it say?
It has about a page worth of definitions, but it says will personified, volition, a solemn vow or
Correct.
determination to
Will
perform any
personify
ritual.
My idea, my intention.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, so it's kind of like a relative concept or something.
Well, I mean, again, you have an individual can have a sankalpa like Vasishtha does, but the teaching of yoga also says that God has a sankalpa. For example, God has the sankalpa that light will travel at 186,000 miles per second. You can meditate all you wish to try to change the speed of light, and it ain't going to happen. So we have a limited or relative freedom, but we can change a whole lot. Some people have habituated negative thinking. I have a terrible life. Misery happens to me always. I'm always getting in fights with people. Terrible, terrible, terrible. That's a person's unconscious sankalpa. But you can change it. And Justin, you've had personal experience with that. I don't want to go into your own personal experience, but as if you've changed your attitudes, the
Oh, I
world
see.
treats
Yeah.
you different.
Yeah, I definitely have.
Yes, meaning you've changed your sankalpa.
Okay.
That's what happened.
Okay. That's what I meant, like my relative perception of what I take this world
But
to
it
be.
also has a macrocosmic meaning as well.
Okay,
Okay,
yeah. my
Anybody
apologies.
else have another question?
I had a question.
Yes.
So is the goal to basically change your sankalpa, like to be aware of it and to change it, or like what do we do with it once we know what it is?
Well, it depends on where we are in our yoga and what our purpose in life is. Ultimately, the yogi lets go of all personal desires. And I surrender my will to the will of the infinite. You operate from a different place. But on the relative sphere, while those of us are still ego identified to a large degree, if, for example, you have a job, don't you?
Yes.
Do you have projects at work?
Yes.
Tell me about one project.
I'm building a scenario modeling tool.
Yeah. So your sankalpa can be, this is going to be a great project. I'm really excited about it. It's going to work. Divine intelligence is going to inspire everybody. This is going to be a cool tool. But on the other hand, if your sankalpa is, oh, I don't know whether I can do this. You know, I'm scared of this. This is beyond my abilities. Oh, this will never work. That's also a sankalpa. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
So we can say on a worldly basis, oh, you need to have confidence in yourself. But yoga is looking at it from a much subtler and broader viewpoint. Now, there's a whole school of practice that developed in Europe in the mid-19th century called the New Thought Movement, where they did healing through mental science, spiritual mind healing. It's gone by many, many different names. People you may have heard of, Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science, Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science. What are some of the new ones? Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. Are you familiar with these things? The latest incarnation of it is Landmark. Their word is intention. Have a clear intention if you do Landmark. Anybody here done Landmark?
No.
The forum, the Landmark forum thing. It's all
No.
stuff. It's all stuff that actually has its origin in India. And they've taken this one idea of sankalpa, which is one small part of the teaching, brought it into the West. But I want you to understand this law. Now, ultimately, what the scripture is going to teach us is this world is far more plastic than we think. And the substratum, the Chidakasha, is never touched by. And the strongest sankalpa is done in a perfectly peaceful and a quiet mind. Now, the spiritual tradition that's using this principle, I think, in a beautiful way, is Tibetan Buddhism. Anybody here been exposed to any of the Tibetan Buddhist practices?
A little, not much.
Okay, so in Tibetan Buddhism, you'll have the monks. They will do these yantras and things like that. And then what are the sand paintings? What do they do when they're done with them?
Oh,
Yes. A sankalpa always begins and ends with a meditation on shunyata, the fundamental emptiness of it all. Otherwise, if you're caught up in, I really want the Cadillac, I really want the Cadillac, then you're not even getting the most basic thing, which is fundamental vairagya, detachment. Now, some of you have done a Vipassana retreat. I know that. And I think you do the metta meditation. We've talked about this before. I think it's may all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be liberated. Something like that. Who can tell me?
You got it.
Okay. And why do you do it? And why do you do it at the end of the retreat? It's a sankalpa. That's exactly what it is. I mean, you don't say it if you don't think it works. Because your minds are most quiet at the end of the retreat. And that's when the sankalpa is
Most what? You whispered the last
powerful.
word. Okay, thank you.
Most powerful. Okay, so we're back to our story. Poor Vasishtha, he sees the king and he sets in motion a sankalpa. Going on.
Asanna maranasyasya bharya mam sharanam gata twadvatsa prarthayamasa jivo bhartu mritasya me mayasit mandapadasmat tathaivanga kritam maya mritasa praktananalpa sankalpat abhavat nripaha. The wife of Vasishtha, whose death was impending, took refuge in me. Like you, she prayed to me, may the soul of my dead husband not depart from this hall. It was so granted by me. He who was dead became a king because of his former great desire.
So this is again a literary device. So Arundhati had the same desire as Leela. May my husband's soul not depart from here. So Vasishtha dies, and he now is reborn as a king to fulfill his deep desire. Of course, Arundhati's a good wife. As the Hebrew scripture says, whither thou goest, I will go. You're going to leave India and move to Tennessee for school, I will come with you. That's what wives do. Going on.
Tasmin eva chidakasho jivakasha itaya sthitaha shokena karshita sadhvi deha mrityu srijaya durataha ativahika dehena sabhartara mupayayao tvameva sasate bharta dvijo bhuttvamagataha. He remained in that same sky of consciousness as the space of the individual soul. The virtuous lady, emaciated by sorrow, casting off her body, went to her husband with a subtle or spiritual body. You are only that, lady. That Brahmana, husband of yours, has attained to the state of being a king.
So what Saraswati says to Leela is that Arundhati, after the death of her husband, she becomes emaciated, she is filled with sorrow, and she dies. And her subtle body then goes to this other loka. Loka is a very interesting word. It means place or people. It means both. We get English words like location, Latin words like locus. Can you think of some other words that come from loca? Anyway, that's the idea. So, what is it that moves from incarnation to incarnation? So, what we're introduced to here is what I call spiritual anthropology. We're going to take a look at what is a human being. And the classic breakdown, there are several of them. One is a threefold nature. First, there is the stula sharira. What's the stula sharira? Gross body, physical meat lump. It's born, it grows up, it grows old, it gets sick, and it dies. It's also called the Annamaya Kosha. Annam in Sanskrit means cooked rice, food. Why? Because the physical body, through its life, consumes a mountain of food and then produces a mountain of poop. And in the end, whether you're buried or cremated, food for worms. That is what is born and what dies. Next, we have the Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body. Actually, I'm going to not talk about it from that standpoint. It's easier to talk about it with the term Antakarana. Antakarana means inner equipment. The inner equipment has 19 dimensions to it. 19 mouths, they say. This is all symbolism. What are they? 5 organs of action, 5 organs of knowledge. What are the 5 organs of action? Hands, feet, tongue, anus, and genitals. What are the 5 organs of knowledge? Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. Now, wait a minute, Jim. That's stuff that's in my physical body. No. If you have a dream, you can run in a dream. You can talk in a dream. You can hear in a dream. So the senses are located in the subtle body. They just function through the physical body in the waking state. The 5 pranas, the Panchavayu, are literally 5 winds. Won't go into them in depth, but they control breathing, elimination, digestion, circulation, and thinking. And again, we have all these functions in the dream state. They function through the physical body in the waking state. Manas, mind, where feelings, emotions, judgments, the discerning the quality of things. That part of us is called the mind. Buddhi, intellect. That's where thought takes place. Ahankara, the ego sense. In the subtlest part of the intellect, the ahankara coordinates everything. So it all happens to me. I'm the one who had toast for breakfast. I'm the one who had salad for lunch. Makes it all seem to happen to one person. And the vasanas are in the subtle body. Those subtle impressions that, based on the force of the past, drive us into activity. So when the physical body dies, it's the subtle body that leaves, goes on to a loka, and then impelled by its desires, reincarnates into another physical body. You do not need to believe this. This is what the scriptures teach. Some of you may have had memories of prior lives. It's not necessary. Just see it as a map of the human person. But because in this scripture it's rooted in the tradition, we will talk about the reincarnation of the subtle body. Now, yourself is not the subtle body. Yourself is Chidakash, space of consciousness. It is nirmalam without taint, nirupaham without any form. It is ajayate. It is never born. It is amritam. It never dies. Classic example, we call it a daka, a pot or a kumbha. We'll use the water glass. The water glass is like the physical body. The water in the glass is like the antakarana. You are like the space in the glass. If I break the glass, what happens to the space? Nothing. So, what's happened? Vasishtha has died. Arundhati, her physical body is withered away, and her subtle body is nothing more than Leela. Vasishtha became the king, Padma. Arundhati became Leela. I have a dear friend whose mother passed away a couple weeks ago, just short of her 101st birthday. Where Barbara is, we do not know. She's in some loka, preparing for her next incarnation, impelled by her desires. What is the body? The body is a vehicle for the satisfaction of desires. I live here in Oakland. If I want to go to Milpitas, I can take the bus. I can take the BART. I can go in a car. Probably not practical to fly. But if I want to go to Honolulu, can't use those vehicles. There's no train that goes from Oakland to Honolulu. I have to take a boat or an airplane. Different vehicle. So the body you have, the family you were born into, with all the various impressions of nature, meaning genetics, and nurture, meaning your family of origin, which have set in motion the life you have. At some level, we've chosen this. We've chosen this. Things we need to experience, that we want to learn. How do I know it? Because you're here.
Jim,
Yes.
in your analogy that you were just describing with the glass, the part I was missing. So in that analogy, there's the air, the glass, and the water. Which is the part that's passed on during reincarnation?
Well, the one I like to use better is a cup of tea with a tea bag in it. Okay. So the physical body is like the teacup. The subtle body is like the tea. The tea bag's your vasanas. That's the potentiality of it all, puts it in. But you are not like air. You are like space. So if I have a paper teacup and it's got tea in it, and there's a little leak in it, so I want to tell you, I can go, and I can pour the tea into another cup. That's like the physical body, it's gone. But if I have the teacup and I destroy the tea, the paper cup, what happens to the space? I can say there's space in the glass. I'm going to do magic. Did I move space? Is the space in the glass, or is the glass in space? And whether the glass is dirty or cracked or beautiful, does it affect space? So also, the self in you is never touched. Now, your job is to come to that direct experience. How? In a mind that's very quiet. Right now, listen to the traffic outside. See if you can notice who hears it. Can you find an Allen in there? Can you? When I look inside, there's nothing. Remember, if you can see it, it's not you.
But my original question was what gets passed on?
The subtle body, the antakara. The self doesn't go anywhere. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody in Zoom land have questions? All right, going on.
Praktani sa smritirlupta yuvayoruditanyaथा swapne jagrat smritiryugvat smrite adhyashtam Ritera adhyashtamam dinam. That former memory of you two, which was lost, arose in a different manner, just as the memory of the waking state arises in dream. Today is the 8th day of the death.
So we do not remember usually our past incarnations. I don't know if it's the trauma of death itself that causes it to happen. But here the scripture compares it to what happens when we dream. So at night, the process is this. I go to my bed, I lie down, I do my prayers, whatever it is that I do. And then first comes deep sleep. Deep sleep is when I forget the waking world. The technical term is avarana shakti, veiling power. Then when the mind projects the dream, I forget that I'm actually in my bed at home. I have the non-apprehension of myself as the waker. Then subsequently, I take the dream body, the dream personality as real. Likewise, where the scripture is going to go with this is this waking state lifetime is like a dream. It's like a dream. Do you incarnate into a dream? Well, it sure feels like it. But I am not in the dream is in me. So even though it is the subtle body that goes from physical body to physical body, so every night that I have a dream, I have a new swapna incarnation, dream incarnation. But none of them really touch you. You were not really in the dream. The dream is in you. And in the 12th chapter of Gita, Krishna says, they are in me, I am not in them. And then a couple verses later, he said, well, actually, they're not even really in me. So if I dream I'm out sailing on the bay, is the boat in my bed when I wake up? Is the dream body real, or is it just imagination? So what the scripture is inviting us to do is take on the idea this phenomenal world is not nearly as solid and concrete and separate from me as it seems. At least for now, be open to the possibility that it's just the play of consciousness coming about with the same kind of process as the dream by means of sankalpa. So Vasishtha now is the studly little king, Padma. Arundhati, loyal that she is Leela. And now they're not only Padma and Leela 1.0. They're now Padma and Leela 2.0 in the hall where the young king looks like he's 16 years old, and Saraswati and Leela is there in her subtle body looking at all this. Let's see what happens now. Oh, there's another very beautiful metaphor that we have. Anybody here play video games?
Yeah, I used to play them when I was young.
What do you call the character that you create for the video game?
Avatar.
Avatar. They stole it from Sanskrit. What the scripture is saying is you're in a video game, and this thing is just the avatar. That's far more real than you can possibly imagine. We define an avatar as a divine incarnation of God. I tell you, that's what you are. Next verse.
देशधैर्यं यथा नास्ति कालधैर्यं तथा नहि एतस्याहं पितुः पुत्रो वर्षाण्येतानि सन्ति मे इति भ्रान्ति जगत् यत्र मृतिमोहात् अनन्तरम् एवं देव्या वच श्रुत्वा लीलाप्रोचे सरस्वतीम्. Just as there is no length in space, so also there is no length in time. That is, both are illusory. I am the son of this father. These are my years. This delusion arises here in this world after the insensibility of death. Thus, having heard the words of the goddess, Leela told Saraswati, the goddess.
So, what Saraswati is saying is time and space are created by the mind. Let me see if I can give you an example of this. Close your eyes for a moment. Visualize a pea. We can make it even smaller. How about a little lentil? Now brush that visualization aside and now visualize an elephant. Is yours an African elephant or an Indian elephant? Does it have big long tusks? Now see if you can imagine it out in the savannah. Let's make them African elephants. There's a whole bunch of them walking by with their little baby elephants along with them. And now imagine you're standing on a mountain overlooking a vast plain with perhaps a river in it. Now open your eyes. Did you not only create objects and beings, but you created space? It was just a pea, it was just a little bit of space. Elephant took more space. Put your elephant on the savannah, even more space. Standing on your mountain, looking at the plain, lots of space. I looked around, I didn't see anybody's head get bigger. Both time and space are created by the mind. This is microcosm. This is the sankalpa of the infinite. But it comes about in the same way. It's all creations of mind. Chaitanya. various forms of consciousness. That's all it is. Next one.
Sargam Brahmanadam Patyo Dhammam Naya Maheshwari Eva Mukta Tu Sa Praha Deham Muktva Bhavamala. Great goddess, lead me to the world of the Brahmana couple. Thus told, she, the goddess, said, become stainless by leaving the body.
So now what we're going to have happen is the scripture is deliberately going to mess with our ideas of cause and effect in time and space. The story starts to get very difficult to follow as we have realities within realities within realities, and not know who's, it's done on purpose. It's meant for us to feel confused, hard to grasp. It's deliberate. Why? In the beginning, we think the world is knowable. That's a table, that's real. This is a chair, that's real. That's a lamp, that's real. God, oh, I'm not sure I believe in God. Self, well, I kind of believe it from scripture. Someday I'm going to experience the whole self. But right now I'm in ignorance. In the end, it's exactly the opposite. The self is the only thing you will ever know for real, for sure. Are you you? It's the only thing that is outside the mind. It's the world that's the mystery. Do you know whether or not you're dreaming right now? Can you prove that you're not dreaming? You read online that some of the people are not believing their doctors when it comes to advice on COVID. They're doing their own research, which is true. They have your belief. That's all it is. Only thing I'll ever know for sure is I am, and I'm seeing something. So here, what happens is the goddess takes Padma out of her physical self. She's in her subtle or purified form, this subtle body, this inner equipment that we've been talking about. And now they're going to go see Vasishtha and Arundhati. Well, I thought they were dead. Remember, time is just a function of the mind. Let's see what happens.
Achetya Chidrupamayi Paramam Pavanidrisham Avalambaya Cha Pashyava Sasarga Managargalam. become of the nature of pure consciousness, free from things perceived. Having recourse to the supreme and pure perception, we shall see together the world unlocked.
So here the teaching is for the person who knows themselves as pure consciousness. The body, the subtle body, becomes an object of perception. So here, the invitation is that Leela has this shift in identity. And now she's not attached to being just Leela. Let's see what happens. Again, part of this is a literary device. Underlying principle is you're not your body, you're not your subtle body. Right? You are pure consciousness. Going on.
Ativahika evayam dvadrishay chitta dehakah adhibhautikaya buddhya grihita chirabhavanat. This mental body is only subtle or spiritual. By long contemplation, it has been understood with the notion of the physical by people like you.
So the teaching here is, what is it that makes me think the physical body is made of matter? It's born out of my parents' lovemaking. It gets diseases. I have to take medicines, etc. What the scripture is saying, it is actually a mental body. It is through the law of sankalpa that it becomes grossified. It is here that I want to introduce you to the corollary to the law of sankalpa. This is really important. What I look at, meaning what I pay attention to, I'm going to think about. I'll give you an example. Don't think about the elephant. Don't think about its long trunk. Don't think about its tusks. Are you successful in not thinking about an elephant? Of course not. If you put your attention on it, you're going to think about it. Whatever I look at repeatedly, I'm going to think about repeatedly. Repeated thought, sanskara, becomes habituated thought. Habituated thought sinks into the unconscious and becomes the law of my life. So if you have a parent who says, oh dear, you're plain, you're ugly, you need to do this, you need to do that. At some point we internalize that. I'm ugly. Empathetically, if your parents say, oh, you're the smart one in the family, we expect more of you. Maybe you get that one from your parents. But you do succeed. You just start with the supposition, I'm smart. That's all the physical body and my life is habituated thinking. that has become grossified through attention. The more you pay attention to it, the more you think about it, the more concrete it becomes. So, for example, if we have some negative thought about ourselves or about another person, we keep running the tape. It gets to feel so real. I think it's out there. I think it's a reality. When in fact, it's nothing but habituated thinking. I was talking with a student who did a 1 month japa retreat in Coimbatore. And one of the things the Swamini, who was running it, said, which I thought was really great. She says, as you're sitting in meditation, and meditate 4 hours a day, pay attention to the thoughts that arise repeatedly. She says, those are your vasanas. Why do they rise repeatedly? Oh, I put them in repeatedly.
Sorry, Jim, could you repeat that? Pay attention to what?
To the thoughts that arise repeatedly. So if you're in meditation and the thought that keeps rising is maybe worry about job. That's where I have the attachment. Or if you're in meditation and the next thing you know is recipes keep coming to your mind. Shopping keeps coming. Maybe food is an issue you need to look at. Do you get the idea, Shweta?
Yes, thank you.
So the Swamini would say, jot it down. Take a look at it. It is a key. Has these things come up out of the unconscious? Okay, it's 9 o'clock. We need to stop. So let me sum up what the essence of the teaching here is. The phenomenal world is sankalpa. It's imagination. Famous statement of Shankara. Brahma satyam jagan mithya. Brahman alone is real. Chidakash alone is real. The Jagat, the phenomenal world, mithya, illusions. We'll get terms like pratibimba, like a reflection in a mirror. How does it come about? By means of sankalpa. My life has come about by means of sankalpa. They are changeable. You are not stuck with your habituated thinking. Some teachings say change your thoughts and your activity will change. Others say change your behavior and the mind will follow. Yoga says yes. Why? Because the physical world is just the grossified form of the mental world. They're the same thing. All right, what verse are we on for next week?
33.
33. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jim.